So hello, everybody. My name is Paula Dinnerstein, and I am on the board of Beyond Pesticides, and I'm also an attorney, and we're now changing our focus to the law. And there will also be a workshop on this later this afternoon with Kim Richman, who I'm about to introduce, and a couple other lawyers about how the law is being used to further the things that we're talking about. So Kim Richman is a lawyer. He's the founding member of the Richman Law Group. His cases address law and policy ranging from public health and sustainability to protecting animal rights and civil liberties. He also focuses on keeping our food systems unadulterated, protecting our privacy online, and defending our environment against corporate interests. And he's been doing some litigation for Beyond Pesticides, and this is just going to be a brief introduction, and as I said, there will be a workshop later this afternoon.
Good morning, everyone. I know that we're all anxious to have a break, so I'll keep it brief and to the point. So it's a real pleasure to be back this year. Thank Jay and his team, and I've really enjoyed spending time with everyone since yesterday. So I'm based in Brooklyn. I have offices in San Francisco and DC. In fact, a self-hating lawyer. I actually have more of an activist approach to law, identify more as an activist than as a lawyer. We do a host of things. Jay was talking yesterday about various tools in our toolbox, and law is, in fact, more and more an effective tool in this day and age. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've used it in an effective and impactful way. We have this motto that what can't be achieved by way of legislation or by way of regulation can be achieved by way of litigation. And we're seeing a whole number of wins in these past couple of years in this administration, which are encouraging. The core value of our work is actually tikkun olam, this concept of repairing the world. And what we do focus primarily upon is repairing our food systems, our adulterated food systems, whether it be because of various pesticides and the like. We have used the consumer protection class action device in a very creative way to address a lot of public health issues, a lot of other issues of concern. We've also used the consumer watchdog device. This is the idea of the power of one, power of many, and how it's basically power to the people. With the consumer protection class action device, we have effectively worked representing a host of people where basically one person can represent the interests of millions. And that's pretty powerful. As a community organizer over the course of my life, I've always struggled with getting numbers, masses out. Here we've developed a very creative tool to organize people in a very effective way. The emergence of the consumer watchdog action is also very effective in this day and age, wherein any of the nonprofits here today can step forward in this day and age and represent not necessarily just classes of consumers, but the general public. And that's something that's emerging in both DC and in California. So over the course of my career, we have focused on everything from trans fat to GMOs to antibiotics and now pesticides. And so it's been a very effective tool. For instance, with trans fat over a decade ago, one of our first food cases, we went after Wendy's that purported to have 0 grams of trans fat, when in fact they had high levels of trans fat. Now, this was a decade before the FDA has finally said that trans fat are unfit for human consumption. And so this was a very effective way to get out in front of a public health issue. And so we'll talk a little bit further about how we've been able to pull together a host of issues with regards to not only public health, but also the environment, as well as animal protection. And we have been able to effectively use truth in advertising as a tool for change. So while companies, as we learned, have been using marketing and other market research in order to sway our view of the world. We now turn it upside down and use it against them. So if, for instance, a company purports to be all natural, we take the position that that is false and deceptive if it contains anything from, say, trans fat, GMOs, or in this case now, pesticides, namely glyphosate. So it's effective in that oftentimes as we see the science is emerging, we also see nowadays science becoming very politicized. With climate change, we see this playing itself out. We see this in other arenas. We heard Carrie talk about how, for instance, now the science around glyphosate is being compromised. And so this is a way to get in front of a lot of the issues before it takes perhaps another decade for the government to wake up. The private right of action, which is in effect what I'm talking about here, as opposed to, say, an administrative action, is direct action against the industry. This is a way in order to not wait for the government to regulate, but to, as consumers or as nonprofits, able to then lean in and make change. So oftentimes, public interest lawyers like myself are regarded as private attorney generals. But what we're seeing now is a trend, a change, where in fact a lot of consumer watchdog groups are stepping forward and effectively becoming now private EPAs, private FDAs, private USDAs, and taking matters into their own hand, not waiting for the government to lean in, but to say to industry, use of terms such as all natural, pure, or what have you, are false and deceptive, and then by way of that, get into their manufacturing practices, into the ingredients. So over the years, we've gone from representing everyday moms and dads to activists to nonprofits and NGOs and even progressive companies. And so it has been a snowball effect, especially in this particular environment. So what we have done effectively is put corporations under a microscope, figuratively speaking. But what we've also done with the power of science is to put them literally under a microscope. And so we often, as part of our investigation, yes, go and find out what is the supply chain. We use FOIA requests. We now more than ever use scientific testing. And so there is, in fact, Larry and John here today, and they are from HRI Institute laboratories. They, in fact, have effectively empowered us to, for instance, address glyphosate in our food systems by doing, mass spec testing and finding levels in our food systems, everything from oats to wheats to honey and beyond. And so, oftentimes, we are regarded as canaries in the mine. And what we have effectively done with a lot of the litigation over the years is to mobilize, to move forward. Keeping our ear firmly fixed to the ground, we've been able to track a lot of issues before the government, in fact, has the opportunity to address it. We have also found ourselves, especially in this day and age, where the government is imploding right before us. Federal agencies are not doing their jobs. Found a way to step forward in our own right. And so what we're seeing is, this movement. We've seen this resistance throughout on issues ranging from, the Me Too movement to Black Lives Matters. And there is a movement. There is what I believe Rachel Maddow has referred to as the golden age of American progressive activism. And what we're seeing here with the litigation and the consumer watchdog groups, moving forward directly in court to the industry and making change. And so while our motto has often been what can't be achieved by way of legislation can be achieved by way of litigation, we actually think the two should go hand in hand, and that there are multiple opportunities for folks to work together to layer not only movements on the ground, social media campaigns, reports about various antibiotics in restaurants, but that there is also a legal aspect of it. There's another tool in the toolbox. So I just wanted to illustrate briefly in terms of how folks can pull together. And so, by way of example, we have, for instance, brought a case against Nature Valley granola bars. And they had purported to be all natural. And here you have a situation where we did detect levels of glyphosate. And so now, granted, the levels of glyphosate that were found in the granola bars were well below what the EPA allows. We nevertheless said it's not a question of whether or not there's legal levels, according to the EPA, but whether or not there's an unlawful level. That by merely saying all natural, you are now holding yourself to a different standard. And we're going to hold you to that standard. And we're going to say, look, you can't have any levels of glyphosate. And so sure enough, we got traction. This case was, in fact, brought on behalf of Beyond Pesticides, Organic Consumer Association, and Moms Across America in D.C. And in D.C., they have, in fact, allowed for nonprofits to have statutory standing to step forward on behalf of the general public. And so we are winning these cases. We're seeing this not only with regards to Nature Valley, we're seeing this with regards to a whole host of cases involving major multinational corporations, whether it be shredded wheat, Quaker Oats, where in fact we're seeing the use of glyphosate as a desiccant. And so we have focused on everything from the sector of oats and wheat. We've also seen it now popping up in honey, orange juice, and tea. Unfortunately, all four corners of our food systems are indeed adulterated, but that with truth in advertising, we're able to address this issue way before the EPA, which is obviously subject to a lot of special interests, and the levels of what's tolerable keep moving up and up, that we can get in on the ground right now and make a difference. So I want to thank everyone for your time and encourage folks this afternoon where, in fact, we will get into some actual case studies and talk about how these matters are indeed being litigated in court. So thank you for your time.